In this training video, we want to talk about controlling your thought life. Dr. Amy Nicely developed a little jingle that I use often. I attribute this to her. You do what you do and you feel what you feel because of the way that you think. Let's talk about Philippians chapter 4, which is a crucial passage to controlling our thought life. In Philippians chapter 4, it reads this in verse 6, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." What are the resources, according to Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, that the counselee has? The first resource that the counselee has is prayer. Oftentimes when I am supervising people in the NANC fellowship, they will use this verse when they are dealing with somebody who is anxious, and I'll ask them to tell me what the verse means. And they'll say, well, the verse means, verse 6, that you pray about your problems. And then I will come back to them and say, well, if you pray about your problems, then they'll go away. And they begin to think through the glib use of this verse. The word prayer here is proskuno. It's the most common word for prayer. It indicates the attitude that someone who has problems or anxieties needs to have to start to resolve those. Instead of calling the pastor and the small group leader and, as it says in verse 6, becoming anxious, we should have the attitude of prayer. Someone who does not pray has an attitude of pride. An attitude of prayer means humility, brokenness, desperation, utter dependency upon God, who is the only one that can do anything about the situation. So it starts off with the attitude of prayer. Second of all, in verse 6, it includes thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. We are to be thankful in everything. And so what can I be thankful in the midst of this situation that I'm facing right now? I can be thankful that God is faithful. I can be thankful that God is consistent. I can be thankful that in a similar situation in the past, God answered me in His timing. I can be thankful because I am His child and I am the apple of His eye. And I am tender to Him, and He's going to care for me. I can be thankful because He's ever present in my life and has not deserted me. Third of all, the verse talks about supplication. This is a form of prayer where we tell God what's going on. We share with Him our hearts. Now you might say, why am I sharing with an omniscient God what is going on in my heart? He already knows. Well, yeah, He does, but perhaps you don't. With all of your sinful emotions, it's hard for you to really hear and see what is going on. But when you begin to pray out loud and tell God about the miserable situation you're in and how you think things are unfair and why things aren't going your way, I think if you have the integrity of heart and honesty of heart, you begin to realize how selfish you are in asking God to do something for you, when this is a trial to refine your character and to prepare you for the next step of His will. Examples of this: David. Just go through the Psalms and realize how many times David poured out his heart. Some say he poured out his heart in complaint. I don't think that David complained. I think David was being brutally honest with what was going on in his life and the fact that he didn't like it. And if you read all of those supplication psalms, you will realize that David comes back to the person of God and the promises of God. And that's what controls his attitude from being unrighteous to righteous. And then you are in a position to give your request. This is a Greek word that specifically says, now I am able to let God know, ask God to do something specifically about the situation because I have had my heart purified. I've had my attitude purified. I'm giving thanksgiving for what He can do or what He has done. I am hearing myself and my selfishness in my supplications, and now I can ask for God's will to be done and that He would be glorified. Now, this will result in something in the counselee's life. According to verse 7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your heart. The idea of guard means a sentinel, a soldier. And notice that your heart and your mind are guarded. Those are the things that get us in trouble, aren't I? The heart representative not only of our emotions, but our volition, our choosing. Our mind represented about how we are thinking about the situation. Here is a precious verse that gives us a biblical prescription on how to handle anxiety God's way. Now, is this a magic cure where once I do it, then everything is done? I'll never have anxiety again. I'll never worry about a situation. Life will be just, a bowl full of cherries without the pits? Absolutely not. We live in a fallen world. You live in a fallen body, and this world is underneath the reign of Satan by the permission of God. We will have trials and tribulations. There will be things that will not go our way. There will be interruptions in our life. But here is a formula that we come back to time and time and time again that works. But notice the order of things: prayer, thanksgiving, supplication, request. And the result is I'm going to have this peace of God, this incomprehensible peace of God that's going to guard my heart and my mind. Many, many years ago, my sister was diagnosed with a mental disorder. And for about 22 years of her life, she was in and out of mental hospitals and really, really struggling, heavy medication. Well, one day she committed suicide. She had attempted it several times, and she was granted permission to commit suicide. She was a believer, and I believe she's in heaven. And that's a whole different topic. The point that I'm trying to make here is this: I found her dead. I was able to get into her little apartment, and I discovered her dead. And that was on a Friday. Saturday, we had to clean out the apartment. A dear friend, a state trooper with Illinois, came over and helped me. And Sunday, I preached. I had a series I was going through, but I changed my message to 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And afterwards, many people came up to me, and I'll remember the one lady, Nancy, came up to me and says, "I don't know how you did that. I would not have been able to do that." And as I reflect on this verse, this is how I could do this. This is how I could continue to serve the Lord, even with my pain and the problems that I was going through, because I had the resources of this verse. For more information about Mount Carmel Ministries, check us out on the World Wide Web at www.mountcarmelmin.org.